So today I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to talk a little bit about SEO theory and algorithms in general. And this is not going to be coming from a place of being an expert necessarily. This is something that I've been thinking about and just a way that I wanted to try to show a simple concept visually and make it a little bit easier for the person who's not necessarily thinking about this stuff all the time to understand and to think about these things. Because sometimes I think whenever you can understand the mechanics behind something a little bit better, it helps you make smarter decisions about how to optimize your site. So let's just look here. I have a spreadsheet pulled up. And what I'm going to be showing is basically a very simple two-factor weighted algorithm that sorts both on crawl and at the query. Okay, I know that might be like, you might say, what the heck did you just say? Or you might be like, okay, that's really basic, depending on where your experience with this. But I'm just going to kind of, again, be going through a little bit of theory here, some thinking I've been doing. Now, keep in mind, this is not necessarily supposed to be representative of exactly how Google works. I'm not claiming that this is the way that Google sorts things, or this is the way that Google even crawls or works in general. I'm saying this is one possible way that you could do sorting with an algorithm. Again, what we're looking at here are two factors. All right, so we have authority and relevance, and then the site. The site itself, these are just numbered 1 through 20. And then we have a relevance score that can be between -1 and 1. And we have an authority score that's based on 0 to 100. Now, I just randomly typed these in. No rhyme or reason, just anything between -1 and 1, and then anything between 0 and 100 I just typed in going down the list without thinking about it at all. So hopefully this will be representative and be able to be a good example. And I'm going to explain a little bit about what each of these are and how they work. So basically what I'm trying to represent here. Now, first of all, let's just look at site relevance authority, the headers here. Whenever Google stores information about your site, or any crawler, when they crawl your site, they're storing bits and pieces of information. Now, it may be that they're literally storing words or text. It may be that they're storing photos. It may be that they're storing references. It may be that they are storing some sort of score. But there are hundreds and hundreds of factors that they may save whenever they crawl a website. All right, so crawling is just a robot that goes and it starts with a website. It follows every link on that website and goes to each of those links, saves some information to a database similar to what you're looking at here. Okay, so again, this is the most simplified two-factor version. But imagine in a world of Google land, there's hundreds of factors, right? It's very, very complex. All right, so what I'm going to basically assume here is that authority, we're basically representing the trustworthiness of a site. And we're not going to talk about how that's derived necessarily right now or in this case, but we're going to assume that this was gathered on crawl. All right, so there's some information that this algorithm already has about the entity based on information that it's already stored. It could be a backlink database. It could be just information about entities database. Whatever it is, it gathered some authority score and assigned it whenever it first crawled the website. Now, the relevance can't necessarily be scored whenever the crawl happens, because you can't necessarily say what is it relevant for exactly, right? So you have to wait until the query, until someone actually searches, to be able to assign a relevance score. All right, so what the crawler would actually be doing is making some sort of notation about the content, right? They're going to be looking at words. They're going to be trying to derive a subject to break down the topics, and they're going to make notes of that and probably put it in some category. We're just going to assume in this case that all 20 of these sites are somewhat similar. They've been added to this list, and they're probably in the same category. Let's just assume that for the sake of this explanation or this little exercise. All right, so the first thing that's going to happen, again, this is just an assumption an example, okay? The first thing that's going to happen is if we were just to ask this algorithm to output websites, and the goal of the algorithm was to represent the best results. Well, we only have a very little bit of information, and we don't know anything about, you're not giving us a subject. You're saying output websites. Just in general, tell us all of your sites. Well, what might make sense in that case is to make this list sorted by authority, right? If we're trying to give the best results, then it might make sense to just go ahead and give you the sites in order of authority. So let's do a sort here, and we'll do largest to smallest, and we have these listed by authority. You can see 10, 1, 4, 11, 16, 18, and so on. All right, so now they're in a completely different order. They're listed by authority. Now, if there's no query, this might be the best way to represent these results. But what happens whenever there is a query is that an algorithm could assign some relevance to that query at the time of the search and then reorder the results. And the important thing to note is that the order here doesn't have to be ignored for them to reorder these results. All right, so let's just take a little snapshot of these results. We'll put them over here somewhere. All right, and then let's go ahead and assume that on search, they have done some sort of, looked at the information that they've stored somehow and come up with a relevant score. Let's pause here for a second. I actually want to show you a completely different website, and this might just help in understanding relevance. All right, so this is the Google Cloud Vision API. If you just go to Google and type in Vision API or Cloud Vision API, you should find this site. You can go right here where it says drag an image file here or browse from your computer. I'm going to go ahead and grab an image. Let me just see if I can find one really quick right here. I'm just kind of randomly picking something from my site. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to grab something and drag that on. Tell it you're not a robot. All right, and what's going to happen is that this particular algorithm is going to analyze this image. It's going to look at some attributes, and it's going to assign some values. All right, so here in this case, we've got these attributes: faces, objects, labels, web, properties, safe search. We've got these attributes: joy, sorrow, anger, surprise, exposed, blurred, headwear. Those are some of the things that it has here. Notice how it assigns a confidence score to what it believes is most likely true. They actually say unlikely. I guess they're saying their confidence is 100% that it's sorry. I'm not exactly sure what exactly this means. Okay, but we can look inside of this and we can see that it knows there's a man. You can see where it thinks the man is. You can see that it knows there's a person. And plants are involved in this, although it thinks pants. Okay, so it is right. I was like, it thinks his legs are plants. No, it's pants. Okay, so that's good. So it's got some objects that it's determined. Labels: people in nature, photograph, bride, dress, hay, male. Look at this. So here's a confidence score, right? So in this particular case, it is 98% sure that this photograph contains people in nature. 94% sure there's a bride, 90% sure there's a dress, 88% sure there is hay, 84% sure there's a male, and you can see on and on as we go down. You can see that like happy 54%, woodland 60%, we see the trees here. So this is a really good example of the kind of information that an algorithm or a search engine might save on a crawl. When it crawled this image, just assume that this image was a web page, and not, instead of just recognizing objects within an image, it's recognizing text and placement and links to that page and everything else, all the other factors, and it's going to kind of throw them in, and it's going to give, it's going to say, we're pretty sure this is, and we're 94% sure this is a bride. Now, let's just assume that the query for image, in this case, let's say we have two images, and the other image, they're 30% sure that there's a bride. Well, if the query is bride, then dynamically on that search, they'll be able to look and assign a relevance score, and they might say 0.9 for this one and 0.3 for the other one. They're 90% sure that this is a better, or they're 90% sure that this has a bride and 30% sure that one has a bride. So that's kind of what I'm talking about whenever I'm talking about relevance in this case. So let's just say that in this case, we do a query and Google on that search resorts the results by relevance. All right, so we're going to sort and filter. We're going to do largest to smallest. And now we have what might be the final set of results. All right, and let's actually just kind of, again, compare these to what we had over here. You can see before the site 10 has the most authority, it was ranked right here, but now it's way down here in position 14. Site 1 was number 2 both times. Site 4, 9, 11, 15, 16, 4. See, like 4 was pretty high both times. What happens is that often you'll have authority and it will be so strong that it can outweigh relevance. Now, in this case, this algorithm doesn't actually let you see that because it could be that this is weighted a little bit differently so that it's not strictly relevance first and then authority. It could be more like take relevance into this percentage amount and authority this percentage amount and combine those two and then sort. Okay, so it can get very complex. That's why it's an algorithm. It's assigning percentages to each of the different factors and then sorting it. But this gives you a pretty good idea in general of what's happening, right? So we did that search and Google was 90% sure that this website was very relevant to what I was looking for. So because of that, even though it only has an authority of 14, it still outranks this site with an authority of 94. Now, see, this is what I'm saying, like in a weighted example where it's not like so strict. If you're this close with relevance and this much difference with authority, this site would probably rank above this one. Okay, that's just in an example of Google. Like I said, this is not representative of exactly how Google works. It's far more complex than this. But what I'm trying to get at is whenever it comes down to two sites that are exactly the same amount relevant, then the one that has the higher authority is going to win. Whenever we get down to the point where the sites are not relevant at all, then it's strictly based on authority. Well, you can see, well, I guess that's not necessarily true because like here is still more relevant than these. But you see what I'm saying? Once you get to the point where things are the same amount of relevance or not relevant, authority becomes significantly important. And so this is one of those things where you could have, let's kind of take this back to how Google actually works for a second. You could have a search where a site, maybe there's no sites that are extremely relevant to the query. Let's say that out of all the sites Google has saved and indexed, when a query comes in, they can only find sites that they're maybe like 50% sure are somewhat related to the query that just got typed in. Now, again, with this kind of thing, when they're not very sure, this is when things like RankBrain come into play and machine learning, that they try to guess based on the behavior of other people who have typed in similar queries, but we're not going to touch on that right now. Sorry, I shouldn't even brought it up. But let's just say that no sites are very relevant, like 50% is the highest. At that point, if not very many sites are very relevant, then authority is significantly more powerful, right? So if you have a site that is very authoritative, but not very relevant, however, there's not any sites that are very relevant, then authority is almost always going to win. On the other hand, if you have sites that are fairly authoritative, but none are very relevant, and one is very relevant, it's very likely that that relevance is going to outweigh authority in some circumstances, because Google's saying, well, we know that this one is exactly what that person is looking for when they type that query, so we're going to go ahead and give this result. Even though we have some other authoritative sites, those sites are just not relevant enough. So thinking about this is a really good way to think about Google sorting in general, just narrowing everything down to relevance and authority. All right, it's not that simple. And really, relevance and authority are made up of hundreds of factors. But if you took those as like the two big buckets that held most of the other factors, it's a really good way to think about how things are sorted. All right, so you want to aim to have high authority and high relevance, and then it's very hard for you to lose in search. I hope this makes sense. I'm really just kind of trying to say some things out loud and talk about some things that I've been thinking about recently. If you have more thoughts on that, maybe someone will watch this who knows way more about algorithms than I do and can give me some information about how to think about this a little bit better. Again, this is really simplified. I wanted to talk about it in a way that maybe I could start this conversation with people who are just trying to understand algorithms or how search engines work. But yeah, if you have more thoughts, please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear it. And maybe I'll make a few more videos like this where I'm just thinking things through in the future. Let me know if you'd like that.